and welcome to Classical Schmassical, the anti-classical classical music podcast. Tune in every Saturday as we discuss, deconstruct, and dissect what it means to be a musician in the modern world. I'm your host, Alexa Laterno. I use any pronouns, and our guests today are Dean Mason and Ian Fales.
Hello everybody, my name is Dean Mason. I'm one of the guests. Obviously, my pronouns are he or they. I play the upright bass, I like to play classical, and also I play in a pop-punk band called All Systems Go. And right now I teach at the Community Music School at Rowan University and in New Jersey, and also I'm a composer.
Hi, I'm Ian. I use he, him pronouns. I also play double bass. Right now I'm working on my master's degree at Manus. I like to play classical, a lot of contemporary art music. I really like playing solo music for the double bass and trying to explore that world. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. So the first thing, I am primarily a composer myself, and I am absolutely just baffled by the double bass. I play the flute, so it's about as far away as you can get. And so the first thing that I was wondering is, what are some things that people just absolutely get wrong about the bass, especially like new music composers who probably don't play bass or maybe string instruments?
I think something that I get annoyed at is when people treat the double bass as just like another string instrument that can't do the same things. They sort of, like in the classical repertoire, you just see like cello bass parts where the bass part is just like a reduced cello part. Somehow that still translates into a lot of contemporary music, and I feel like that makes sense like in an orchestration, from an orchestration viewpoint, but I don't know, in contemporary music I'm kind of expecting to see composers like figure out what the bass can do that hasn't been explored already, or like trying to figure out new sounds that differentiate it from like the cello or the other strings or other instruments, like I don't know, breaking from what makes sense like in an orchestration viewpoint, breaking from that and trying to give the voice of the bass its own moment.
Yeah,
I feel the same way. I was like, that's the first thing that comes to mind for me too. It's like, a lot of people don't know that the bass is more than just a lower cello, which, hey, no disrespect, I love the cello by all means, but I think the best orchestrators, especially nowadays, give the bass their own part. If you're just having the bass double the cello, you're leaving a little bit. And I think the other thing is that a lot of people don't realize just how versatile the bass is, because, you got that big body, there's a lot you can do. Especially like, for example, I like to tell people if you write a part for the double bass and there's no pits, you kind of like didn't use all of the potential of it, you know what I'm saying? So just, stuff like that.
Sure, yeah. I actually just wrote my first ever bass piece for Ian, and I definitely had like a really interesting time trying to like explore all the different sounds, because I think that I do fall into that trap of writing it for it sort of simplistically or not really exploring those potential. But like in a solo piece, I was like, oh, this has to be the melodic instrument, surprise, because otherwise you don't have a melody.
Right.
And I will say, like in the piece you wrote me, I love it. I will be playing it beginning of March. Stay tuned, everyone. Yeah. But for that piece, I felt like you really captured something that I think the bass can do a lot better or a lot more effectively than other instruments, which is like just such a resonance, like a huge wash of overtones and like just all that sound that can pour out of it. Not in the same way as like a really high violin or cello that could just like blast that one pitch to the back of the hall, but like that beautiful like open resonance. I think that's something the bass can do really well, and I think that's something that like you were able to capture really well.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's like it just relies on like, I don't know, hitting harmonics or using open strings or stuff that like might turn into like simple music when you are looking at it, but like technically it requires like the finesse to make everything ring and everything pop, and I think you did it really well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a really warm sound, isn't it? Like when you play the same note on bass that you do on cello, it's like the sound is like a world of difference, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes, you do want the way that the cello sounds depending on what it is, but you know, like just how warm the bass sounds when you play in those upper registers is like a big thing. So.
Yeah. So kind of going off of that, are there like specific composers or pieces that you feel like really exemplify like, oh, this is amazing bass writing?
Yeah. I mean, just looking back through like all the pieces I've played, I find composers that stick out. I mean, first of all, this is one thing that I've noticed. I don't know if everybody feels the same, but I kind of feel like Beethoven was the first composer that like really wrote well for the bass. And granted, some of his stuff is like really tough and out there, like his Fifth Symphony especially, and also kind of some stuff in his Ninth. But like he was friends with Domenico Dragonetti, the famous bass soloist. So his bass parts are like they're still kind of like unusually like hard and technical, and like they don't fit as well as some later composers. But I feel like his parts, he was like the first composer that wrote well for the bass. That's how I feel. Other guys, like I've always found Brahms's bass parts fit really great underneath the hands. And then there's guys like Mozart and Vivaldi, who every time I play something by them, it's like the hardest thing I've ever played in my life. I don't know. Personally, that's just how I feel.
You're like fighting to sound like a nice light violin. Mozart is hard, but not for the same reasons.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
For me, I really like bass music from Strauss. I think he gives the bass its own voice so much of the time, and it's so like boomy and fun. Like Ein Heldenleben, the first page of that, or Don Juan, those excerpts. In also Sprach Zarathustra, there's that whole like bass fugue in the middle of it. It just starts with like that nasty deep rumbling and then like builds up from there. He really like takes advantage of what the bass is offering in that low extension in that range.
Strauss's parts are really hard too, but
Yes.
like it works. You know what I'm saying? Like I mean, like we played Don Juan. Like I haven't even tried Ein Heldenleben excerpts, but like it's really tricky, but like it really does work though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sits as well as like it could. I think it's equally hard for everyone. So it's not like he doesn't understand the instrument. He's just making everyone practice.
Yeah. Right.
Sure.
Also, are you familiar with the Prokofiev Quintet? He wrote it for like this circus. It was for, they only had 5 instruments. They had a violin, viola, bass, and then oboe and clarinet. So he was kind of forced to write for that orchestration.
Okay.
Cool.
But like he wrote it with like the bass is like this weird inner harmony so much of the time, and using harmonics, but also like getting that really deep like guttural bass sound for some of the cool like lower melodies. Like I think Prokofiev also has done really good bass music.
Cool, yeah. Off the top of your head, are there any more modern composers that really get the bass as well?
I think I played this like really cool modern as in like the 70s and his atonal, but like we're getting there.
Yeah.
This Nicholas Ma, Old King's Lament. It's he wrote it for this like silly bass convention at this I think it's called the Isle of Man or something, like a tiny island near the UK or in the UK, I don't know. It was for this huge bass convention, and he was like commissioned, or he wrote the solo for the competition, and it's like super cool, and it's super like kind of old-fashioned atonal, whatever you want to call that. I don't know how to describe that sound, but I think he really like nailed it when he was writing for like what the bass can do and still being challenging while being like attainable.
I played a piece by a Syrian composer, Karim Rustam. I think he's Syrian, if I'm remembering correctly. It was called Dabka, which is based on a traditional kind of dance. And the bass part for that was awesome. It was so well written. It had like tasteful use of double stops and stuff. Like I had a blast playing that every single time. Gunther Schuller, his double bass writing was like notoriously hard. I say hard like it's a bad thing, but it was very. He really knew how to make the best use out of it.
There's also do you know the Stravinsky's L'Histoire du Soldat, the Soldier's Tale? It's like this chamber ensemble piece for like a cool little chamber setup, string quintet and wind quintet and percussion. And then Wynton Marsalis wrote like an arrangement of that, or like his own version of that called A Fiddler's Tale with the same orchestration. And I thought that was like a super cool bass part. It was also like very well written, and it wasn't like explicitly like a jazz thing. It was its own,
Right.
like his own style, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
just speaking as like a composer who also plays the bass, like the just from the stuff I've played in concert, and believe me, a lot of my colleagues have played way more pieces in concert than I have, but just the amount of stuff I pick up on, you really learn a lot of what not to do when you're playing other people's music on the bass, and it's like all sorts of stuff like. I mentioned about like trying to include like some pitch notes for us and stuff like that, but from an orchestration standpoint, like what sounds the best and what doesn't blend quite as well. From even like a music notation standpoint, like what's unclear and what's clear. Like it's stuff that like I think about a lot, and I feel like everybody like okay, well I shouldn't generalize, but people in general are very thoughtful about how they compose for the violin or clarinet. But a lot of times, like, a lot of questions come up about what's easiest for the bass. And so it's cool to, like, be able to, like, play an instrument that not everybody plays, that you can kind of, like, it's not like writing for the harp where, like, there's, like, a whole host of challenges and, like, even way less people play the harp and play the bass. But like there's like a little bit of like it's good to have a little bit of insight, I guess. I don't know. So.
Sure, yeah. And I know, so you mentioned notation, and that's actually something that I wanted to touch on. I know that like there's a lot of books out there on notation, like composers everywhere, like Swear by Behind Bars, like all of these different books that go over really well the different conventions. But I think that there's, in my experience, I found it to be quite lacking when we get into more modern techniques. Some of them even consider like pizzicato or double stops to be extended techniques. And I think probably as a society we've moved on from those things being considered extended. So I was curious if you could talk about some of the extended techniques that the bass can do that I like might still be considered sort of more extended, or things that are surprising or fun uses, and also the ways that you as players would like to see them notated.
I think the biggest like extended, almost non-extended, like almost standard technique that I could think of is like how to notate harmonics. I know it's not a bass only thing, but I feel like a lot of composers like I don't know, Ravel and others use bass harmonics a lot more than like the other strings harmonics. And I feel like that has been inconsistent, and I don't know, I'm kind of back and forth on like what I would prefer though, because right now I have this piece I also commissioned for like the same little project I did for Alexa. She used a lot of harmonics in her piece, and she wrote it in such a way that it just shows the note that you would put your finger on instead of like the sounding pitch. And in her context, in that context, it makes sense because it's like runs and like lines with harmonics. But then you have some like crazy stuff like Ravel having, I don't know, the diamond on one note, the other on the other, the string indication that gives you like way more information than I think you need to like play it, but harmonically it is useful to like instantly remember what note that is, which octave that is, you know.
Sure. So would you say that like there's obviously a lot of different ways that you can notate harmonics, and can't even imagine, like as a flute player I cannot imagine how annoying that might get. But is there a way, like you were saying, in different contexts there are different levels of like being helpful. Is there a way that like as a composer who doesn't play the bass that I might like know which one is going to be preferable to the player or easier to read if I'm giving it for a reading or things like that?
I don't know, because honestly, like I think it is like a context thing. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, the best option, in my opinion, is always the one that's least ambiguous in terms of, like, something meaning more than one thing. Like, when you notate an artificial harmonic, right, you have the stopped note on the bottom, and then the note that's being sounded, or where the finger goes, or whatever you want to say, on top. That, I think, is less ambiguous than if you just put a diamond note head and say, because I'm saying, okay, do I put my finger there, or is that the sounding pitch? I've always been in favor of having the note head of the sounding pitch, and if it's an open harmonic, just a little open O over top of it, the open circle. But of course, when you're playing harmonics up on the neck, up high, as opposed to way down near the bridge, then it becomes a little tricky, right? Because it's like, okay, well, do I play the harmonic up here? Do I play it way down near the bridge? So, but of course, depending on the context in the piece, maybe there's only one place to play that note, and
Sure.
then maybe it's not ambiguous. So, but you mentioned behind bars. Perhaps it's better just to default to what the books say.
Yeah, or also ask a player. That's
yeah.
that's what I do.
Who's going to be playing it? If you
Anytime I'm writing stuff for instruments, I don't play. I'm always like, hi. And usually I've made a billion and one mistakes.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's helpful to know. Yeah, I know my favorite extended technique to write for the bass is the seagull effect. I know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Classic.
I had that in the piece that I wrote for you, Dean. But I was very unclear as to how I should notate that. So
What you wrote, I seem to remember, ended up working pretty well. You had the like I said, so we know the seagull effect is an artificial harmonic that slides down the neck, right? And it still sounds out the entire time. And as the finger that's holding the harmonic, as that slides over the different spots where the harmonic would sound, it kind of goes like kind of like that. So I was not a vocal major anyway. But so what you could do is you could notate the artificial harmonic up near the top with a solid note head on the bottom and the diamond note head above it where you want that finger to be, and then at the end of the seagull effect duration, you just put a solid note head with a diamond note head a little bit closer to it, and then just connect the respective notes with portamento lines.
mm-hmm.
I mean, looking at that, when you're doing the seagull effect, the exact placement of the finger above the natural or above the stopped finger to make the harmonic, most of the time that's not going to matter anyway, right? I could imagine a composer being very specific about where they want that finger to be, but
rip to them, but I'm different.
But for the most part, it's not really going to matter. It's just an effect, so
Sure, yeah.
Wait, Dean, I thought the seagull effect was, I thought the open harmonic glissando, just gliding over the open string. That's what the seagull effect is in my mind, not any artificial harmonic.
Oh, interesting.
Oh,
We
I
have different
see.
seagull effects.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because in
Okay,
the...
yeah.
Go ahead. The one time I played it, I think we read through a piece that used it. The lower strings were all doing the seagull effect, and it was just us dragging our fingers across two strings.
What piece was that?
It was a piece written by an NYU grad student in my undergrad.
Oh, okay. I would say,
it was
because I've played that before too in a piece. It would have been funny if it was the same one. But
they labeled that as seagull effect, and everyone kind of understood what that meant. They all just started randomly gliding.
Okay.
I've never
Interesting.
done it with an artificial harmonic. You're just doing it
my understanding of a seagull effect from a flute player composer's perspective, so not the expert, is that you would stop and then have a high up artificial harmonic and then keep the finger position the same even as you the physical distance is the same even as you're going up, so the distance is changing and the harmonic is changing. That's when I think of seagull effect from just what I've gained from the atmosphere of being a musician. That's where I'm coming from, versus an open harmonic glissando is something I think of as distinct from that. but
They probably call them both the seagull effect.
Yeah.
You're right, they are two different effects, but Ian, actually, I believe that what you mentioned is also frequently referred to as the seagull effect.
interesting.
So, yeah, give it if you haven't done the one I was talking about, give it a try sometime. It blows your mind how well it works. So
Yeah.
I was just gonna talk about that for a second longer. Indicate what string you want it on, Alexa. That was the one thing that had us confused.
Sure, yeah.
And it's easier on the thinner strings, whatever you want to call it. On the G string, it's a lot easier than on the E string. So, but yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. And so, if it from a notation perspective, hopefully, like these extended techniques would be something that the composer would put in the front matter and explain what they were wanting. But so, like you described the sort of seagull effect one, I'll call it. But with that open harmonic glissando, how, like, do you have a thought about how that could be notated to be sort of clearly distinct from?
I've seen it as they just put like the open string with the diamond and then say seagull effect and then in parentheses like an asterisk footnote explaining what to do. I forget if I've seen this or I've just like conceptualized it, but no, I think in another piece that like someone wrote for like a chamber group of mine, they like put a diamond effect at a very high harmonic on the G string and then a diamond effect on like not a harmonic, just a high note, and then a diamond on a low note and just said like gliss without pressing down, some like written out explanation of it, and it was the same thing.
Gotcha.
I feel like that's not at all standardized though.
Yeah.
We need to call up the book.
Yeah. The only way I've ever seen it, it's been pretty easy to understand. So.
Yeah, I feel like it's not hard to explain, but it's been done differently every time I've seen it.
Probably don't just say seagull effect because as we've discovered, that's two things.
Right, definitely.
Cause a fight in the orchestra.
Amazing. It's performance practice.
But there's a lot more basic extended techniques than just that, though. I mean, the harmonics are my favorite, I will say. The bass has really nice natural harmonics just because of how big the resonating body is. Like I've played a piece where like the main theme of the movement is played all on the natural harmonics. It was sweet. But anyway, but you've got your Bartok pits. If you're gonna write that, don't give us too many because it puts the strings out of tune and it's bad for the instrument. We've got you could bow the tailpiece. You ever tried bowing the tailpiece?
That's what I was gonna mention. It's so cool.
It's a fun one.
Feels like an organ.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah,
Have you like seen that, Alexa?
I haven't. No.
I've only played it like once. I don't know if people like. You have to know about this new technique. No, but like, my bridge my tailpiece has a ridge on it. It's not like perfectly rounded, and I think that made it easier for me. I tried it on like rounded bridges, and I wasn't as able to do it. But
yeah, you need a lot of rosin.
Yeah, I had to like put on an extra swipe mid-concert just for this one piece because like you have to, I don't know, it's like you just bow the tailpiece and it vibrates the whole instrument and
oh, whoa.
The pitch is whatever, you don't really know what it's going to be, but
like isn't pitch always whatever, like to be fair.
Yeah.
Especially if you play the bass.
Hey.
R.I.P. Yeah, but you can knock on the bass. There's spots where it's better to do that. I believe up near the shoulders is the best spot, like on the back. But the bass is, it's makes a better drumming sound than knocking on the violin. No offense to my my upper strings homies, but play a little bit of percussion on it.
Yeah, awesome. And so would that just be notated? Would you like want to see that with just like an X note head and then like knock on shoulder or?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's for any makeshift percussion instrument.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and then we got sul tasto and sul ponticello.
Trying to think of like more bass specific ones.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them, like knocking on the instrument, the sol pont, sol tasto, it's like always great to hear them played very specifically on different instruments, because like I find that they have so much of a different effect depending on what string you're using. So like a big part of the why I wanted to start this podcast was because anytime I'm writing for an instrument I don't know about, I go on YouTube and I'm like, bass extended techniques, and there just aren't people that have them, and I'm like, I want you to show me exactly what you can do. I know all these techniques exist and I know what they mean, but I want to hear how they sound. And so like that's why I was like, I should do a podcast that's about instruments, and then I was like, or everything. So like even things that are not incredibly bass specific, totally like they all work differently on the bass, so definitely
noted.
The one film score that I've done thus far, all of the soundscapes, sound effects, was all me doing stuff on the bass and then putting it through Audacity to make it sound cool. So there were some things like a professor had me try taking the little part of the bow that like you turn to tighten the hairs. I like literally don't even remember what that's called.
Bow screw, maybe?
I guess.
Oh my gosh.
But he had me pluck the string so that it was vibrating, and then slowly put that against the string so that it made kind of like a sound as the string like was stopped. It was hard to sustain, and it didn't like sound like super loud at all, so it wasn't really usable in a concert setting, but it was a great sound for like a horror movie like sound effect, like the creepy thing coming around the corner.
Or for somebody maybe using like electronic processing of a live or things like that. Could be really cool to use. Oh, that's so good to know.
And then I mean, you could bow the music stand. We all, bowing the music stand.
We love bowing music stand. Oh my god, they're so fun.
The crappier the music stand, the better. Oh my god.
I'm like, I don't want to do that to my bow. Does that even make a sound?
Oh yeah.
That's awful. I will not be doing that.
And then, go ahead. Go.
I was just gonna say you can also vibrate natural harmonics. A lot of people don't realize, but especially on the bass, because while this finger is pressing the string down, you can increase and decrease the pressure, which like towards and away from the fingerboard, and that changes the length of the string without changing the pitch. Well, with changing the pitch because it changed the length of the string. So you're essentially vibrating the natural harmonic. I had to make a video of myself doing it because everybody in this Facebook group I was in was saying that it was impossible, and I was like, you can do it. So I made a video.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
I feel like the bowing or vibrato in the natural harmonics is like, I don't know, it doesn't feel that crazy. It just sounds kind of like normal vibrato. Wait, so can you repeat how you do it? You're just like gently wiggling on the note, or are you doing anything else?
Well, I mean, to produce vibrato on a regular note, we wiggle the finger. That's akin to going up and down the neck, right? I guess you could describe it that way. I mean, to vibrate a natural harmonic, you increase and decrease the pressure because the string's not pushed all the way to the fingerboard, right? And
you're pressing down a little bit.
Yes.
And I'm just like, go ahead.
I was just saying that changes the length of the string and that changes the pitch. But if you had a different way of doing it, then
I just wiggle a little bit, like normal vibrato, but I kind of pull to one side, so I think I'm effectively like doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Interesting. I've never thought about I never think of it as just like pressing down. Like I'll be like just pushing a little bit to the side, like away from me, and like moving up and down, wiggling like normal vibrato, and has that same effect.
That's so cool.
I think a funny story about like natural harmonics. At this summer camp I went to in high school, I was playing the Lieutenant Kijay bass solo,
Yep.
which is like, which is a beautiful, yeah, that's the one. Wait, we weren't remembering any, yeah, that's it.
Right. Yes.
But I was playing that, and I naturally was just playing it with harmonics because I didn't know, I wasn't that good at the bass yet. I was still in like 10th grade or whatever, and I was playing it with the harmonics, like the G and the D normal, and I was putting my normal amount of like vibrato on it, but as harmonics. And then the bass professor there, who was there? Some bigwig, I should know his name. Like, he was like, "What are you doing?" Like, he didn't like it. He said it sounded crazy. And I mean, I think for the piece it did sound crazy, but I don't know. At that moment, that was my natural instinct, so I will give myself credit for that.
Well, hey, we depend on natural harmonics in a lot of ways playing the bass. I mean, that's a long neck. You think I'm going to hit every single note perfect every time? If I got natural harmonics, I could lean on then. And if I can put vibrato on it to make it sound like a regular note, then, hell yeah. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so, there's like the A harmonic that uses a cheat instead of diving up high. I use that one every once in a while. I actually am using it in Alexa's piece for one of the little runs. I just sneak in a harmonic to make it easy.
That's what you gotta do. That's what it's all
about. Oh, and then I know in the piece that I wrote for you, Dean, the sort of ending technique I had was like a breathy sound that I thought was really effective, and I would love to know more about it because I don't really know what I was doing, but I love what you did with it.
That was rad. I don't think that'll be tough to pull off in a concert hall without some kind of amplification. But what Alexa had me do, and I'd never even heard of this technique before. What was it called? Toneless or something like that?
Toneless, I think. Yeah, it was a Google search for bass extended techniques that led me down that rabbit hole.
Yeah,
but...
that was neat. I had to bow the part of the bridge where the strings are coming over the bridge. So just that solid part there where it's like nothing moves. I was dragging the bow across that to just make like a kind of sound. And I kind of timed it with my breaths. I actually didn't actually time with my breaths because I was nervous and I was like breathing like but I made it sound like deep breaths, like the inhale was the up bow and the exhale was the down bow, and it kind of it was just almost like a white noise kind of sound, and I was able to like use the bow to kind of make it sound a little more natural. So that was neat. I never heard of that before until last year. So.
I've actually played a piece in an orchestra where they did that, where they had the like low strings start on doing that technique, and everyone like came in over time, and you couldn't really hear anything until like the entire orchestra was playing just that little bridge effect. It was the tiniest little wash of sound, but no, it's super cool, yeah.
That's great. Okay, so I guess when the whole section is doing it, it really speaks.
Yeah, you need the whole section, and we had to like press. We were like doing like an audible hiss like in our little area, but like out in the audience, it was just that nice wash. It was cool. I remember. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm also really curious because I know like every instrument has their own like performance injuries, and we all like suffer in our physical form for our art or whatever toxic relationship we have with our instruments. So I'm really curious as to what are some common performance injuries, and are there tricks for avoiding these when playing bass?
Well, the nice thing about the bass, in my opinion, is that if you're not doing it correctly, it starts to hurt quick. I've noticed. Like,
that's true.
Like, your fingers need to be like arched in the right way. Like I actually got away with like crappy pinky position for a long time.
Wait,
like,
me too. That's what I was gonna mention first.
Yeah, but in general, like if you're not like, because the strings are hard to push down, right? Like if you're not if you're not doing it right, then it actually starts to hurt pretty quick, and that kind of helps you like fix it up a little bit. Whereas like piano, you can get carpal tunnel after like months of not playing it right or something like that. I think one time I got shin splints from standing too long in rehearsal. Like,
Whoa.
yeah.
That's rough. That's why I play with a stool.
Yeah. So definitely
I really
like
need to,
yeah. So like listening to your body is definitely a big part.
Yeah. And I will say that ever since once quarantine hit, I like stopped playing as much. Beforehand I was playing, I don't know, we had my like 1 to 2 hours of personal practice intermixed between like my hours of other rehearsals and other engagements. Like you were constantly like, in addition to your personal practice, kind of going through like the stamina exercises to keep yourself like ready to go. But now, since I'm only playing those 1 to 2, usually 1 to 2, I'm not gonna lie, 1 to 2 hours a day of personal practice, I'm like, I don't have that same like stamina anymore as I think I did. So I found that like I have to stretch every day. I actually like have a little, before I even unpack the bass, I stretch my arms and legs just a little bit, and that helps. And I notice that if I like don't warm up for at least 30 minutes to an hour, then I like will have to be done before I even hit the hour mark.
Yeah.
Because I warm up for 30 minutes, like my normal little, not music, just warming up routine, and then my first 30 minutes of practice has to be something like low stakes, like something, I don't know, not hard on the body. Like the other day, I started with like Beethoven 7 excerpt, first movement, that crazy, loud, really long, dramatic, and I literally practiced that for 20 minutes and I had to stop for the day.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
You know what else starts to bother me too? I was gonna say the bow grip. Like if I'm like at my absolute best, like then usually like my left hand starts to give up before my right hand does. But if I'm like playing something that like it's hard enough that I'm not able to like make sure I'm keeping good bow grip, then that starts to go, doesn't it? Like your fingers start to cramp up. Like you're if like your bow is like getting like wrong in your hand, I don't know. But
Yeah. Like with Mozart specifically, I think.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, that just makes me so tight and tense. I'm trying to play all like nice and light and fluffy Mozart, and it just like, I don't know. Yeah, that I will say messes me up. The bow technique.
Yeah, and then if you play a lot of pits, then you get the blisters. Every time I played Chardage, as a bass player, not as a soloist. But,
that sounds fun.
Yeah, every time blisters. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. But amid it all, what do you love most about playing the bass?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh god, I have to think about this.
Okay, let me go first.
Like, I hate it. It's the worst.
Yeah, I'm like, hold on, let me make something up.
It's like, oh no, I'm just not good at anything else.
No, I got this. Okay. So we don't often have the responsibility of like playing all the melodies, but almost all the time we are responsible for driving and maintaining the tempo. And it took me a while to really get comfortable with that, and by that I mean it took me playing Marriage of Figaro to really get comfortable with that. But I appreciate that responsibility a lot now. Like when I'm playing in an orchestra, and like I can feel that it's not together. Like that really makes me like think about like my role as like the bass player, and like and not just like as a low like voice player, but specifically the string bass. I think oftentimes really kind of is relied on to like kind of keep time in those instances. And when I'm playing bass guitar or like any kind of cover gig or like in my band, like that's once again like bass is like really a thing there. So
Yeah.
honestly, I think my favorite part of playing the bass is something very similar. I think one moment that I was really gassed up and in love with my like career choice as a bass player was like when I was playing some chamber group, and I don't know, it was really hard. We were all struggling for a long time. And then at the end of it, like once we got through the really hard concert and we were like panicking the whole time, we ended up sounding like really good. We were playing like the parts of the Prokofiev quintet, and then like I had like some other little things. Like it was a big program. It was awful. But this one, like the cello player I was playing with for most of it, when we played, I forget what we played also, like some original composition, I think, and maybe the Rossini duo. Like, she was like, "Oh, Ian, you're so easy to play with." And I took that to heart. I was like, oh my god, that's the only thing I want to hear from now on. I don't care if I'm in tune, in time, anything. I just want to like be known as like being easy to play with. And like, I don't know, it made me feel like I was supporting the entire ensemble in such a like subtle but really important way. I don't know. It's kind of like playing support in Overwatch or like any other video game. I felt like that same fun responsibility in a video game as I would like in an ensemble.
So the bass player is like the bard or a cleric in a D&D campaign.
Yeah. Or like a tank in League or something, whatever you call it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, for sure.
I love that.
And also, every ensemble in the world needs a bass player, so we get gigs. So
It's true.
Nice.
That's true.
Yeah, in theory.
Oh, you're right. In theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that actually transitions really well from our sort of know-how segment into the bigger, deeper, big questions.
What?
Yeah, I know. I'm real official. Yeah, I didn't think that personally it would be very responsible for me to use this podcast as a platform just for these sort of frivolous discussions when I do have really big thoughts. And I know that I have a lot of good friends who are also thinking big thoughts about the music world. So you mentioned getting gigs. And I know that's something that's kind of on the mind of probably every musician in the world. Like pretty much all, regardless of how easy or hard it is for any individual, we're kind of all thinking about gigs as something that's on our radar. And playing into that, I think we can all agree is sort of this conservatory mindset and almost like a conservatory to orchestra pipeline. And I was really wondering, how has this structure affected you? How have you participated or not participated by choice or not by choice in this system? And how do you think that overall that impacts kind of our musical world? It's like a big question, so you can take a second if you need to.
I think... Oh,
Go ahead. No, you got this.
I think that the first thing I thought of when you said the pipeline, the conservatory orchestra pipeline, I'm like thinking about how big that pipeline probably is. It's like the size of like a toothpaste tube coming from like a large reservoir. I don't know. It's a scary thought to think that like we're all training for like, I don't know, the tiny orchestra positions that there are and will be. So I don't know, it's hard to like be prepared for that enterprise after graduation and to want to do that alone. I'm like, I don't know if I want to like join the audition circuit. But then I'm like, before quarantine, I was getting the tiniest hints at like a freelance career. I got like 2 or 3 paid, like normal union paid gigs within like the month or 2 beforehand. I was like, okay, wait, we're beginning our very shallow incline to having like gigs, you know? And then that all got shut down. And then now in quarantine, I've been like, well, I don't know when the gigs will start up. I don't know what orchestras or ensembles will make it through the end. Like, should I just prepare for auditions and start trying to like get those retirees, you know, like get those spots after everyone leaves because of COVID? I don't know. It's like I'm kind of between how I should be thinking about my career and where I should be going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that kind of like hurts us as people who study classical music, when you go to school for like a master's in business administration, for example, you're not only paying for the training, but you're also paying for, the institution. You're counting on them being able to, essentially set you up for a career. You're counting on being able to, you do your studies and then you go off and you're able to get a job thanks to the studies that you did. I think music schools and that whole culture, I think, is a little bit too complacent with the idea that you go to music school and then you go out and you struggle to find a career and you compete with everybody else in the world. I think, certainly it's on the musician to, find a path for themselves. And I do believe that those paths exist aside from just trying to be an orchestra musician, of course, because obviously those jobs are limited, but also to like find their own way like in the world as a musician. But I also think that institutions kind of need to do their part in preparing their students for what comes next. You know, they shouldn't just be saying, okay, you know, you play your Brahms, you play your Beethoven, you do your recital, now get on out there. You know, I think it's kind of their responsibility to set their students up for what comes next. So, and, you know, I've known a lot of music education majors that have gone on to have like great and filling jobs as music educators. So that's really awesome. But like, you know, what about like the performance majors? You know, like
I don't want to teach. At least not a public school. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, like it's not like you know, if you want to teach in a public school, you become music education major. That should be your interest. You know, we shouldn't be thinking about like trying to fall back on that. That's not what makes a good music teacher, is somebody's backup plan. I mean, we all know that.
Snaps to that.
But I just think you know, all institutions should be more mindful of are we preparing the students that we take in for what comes next, or are we just taking their money? So.
Yeah. And building off of that, what do you think the place is for new music within that preparation system? Because I know that, at least from my perspective, I don't see a lot of room for new music in the current audition circuit, which I think is part of this perpetuation of this, like, really, I hesitate to use the word oppressive, but really overshadowing classical canon, and also in many ways oppressive.
Yeah. Overbearing, perhaps.
Rigid.
Yeah. There's this very distinct mold that classical musicians are, I think, shoved into, whether we want to be there or not. And if you're not in the world, you don't know anything other than this, like, you know, Mozart, Bach, Beethoven.
Right.
Period, end of story. And having these like standard rep for the audition circuit, and that's what we're prepping you for. I'm just curious as to like how you envision new music becoming a part of that whole system.
I think new music for me, and like collaborating with composers, has been like where I find solace during these troubling times. Like that was dramatic, but it's like the only like sort of productivity I've had towards my like career in this time has been like my personal practice, and then like making new music with people as much as I can in this virtual format. I'm not really able to prepare for auditions in the same way, but I don't know, I feel like creating music with your pals and like having fun with it and trying to make that work through like the grant writing and the fundraising enterprise, that's not the right word, but like trying to dive into that, I think, is very much like on my horizon as well, since I'm, I don't know, not going to entertain auditioning too intensely. But I've been going to like, I've seen all these workshops, and I've talked to all these like chamber ensembles that talk about their whole process of like sustaining themselves as musicians just through like their grant writer and like their mission statement, and giving to the community what they can provide as a chamber ensemble and trying to garner support for that mission, you know? And I really think that is like, that should be supported more by like our government, our communities, our like public arts councils. I mean, they just deserve more funding to be able to fund more musicians like us. But I mean, I really think that's like the avenue for a lot of young musicians right now who are kind of like, I don't want to audition, I can't teach. You know?
Yeah, I feel like the classical music world's kind of stubbornness to move on from like only like old music, I think that's part of what is preventing art music from having the impact and the reach that it could among new listeners, because you know, I feel like a lot of the times, like, I think we've probably all sat in an orchestra rehearsal and like played like one of the classics per se with the ensemble, and everybody's playing great, everybody's playing with feeling, and then what's next? A new piece comes on the stand, something from the 70s, and everybody just plays like they glaze over and they play with that feeling, and they're like, oh, here's some new music, who cares? But I really think if, you know, we treated art music as a world that could continually grow and evolve, then that would allow it to grow and evolve and to like really meet new listeners and more people that could be engaged by it. Because I mean, look, the pop music world moves at a million miles an hour. You've got like, 10 years ago or whatever, you had Bruno Mars bringing funk back. Now you've got like Billie Eilish and like Lizzo and stuff. And like whatever, whatever comes next, like the sound changes so quick and nobody questions it. They just go with it and like, all right, this is, what's good. I like this. Let's keep moving it forward. And it's great. And, we need something like that in the art music world. We need to be able to like keep moving forward and keep, taking in new music. And of course, like, hey, I love Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony. Okay. That's one of my favorite pieces ever. But like, why can't we have like even like 50% old music and 50% new music would be awesome. And that's still giving a huge chunk of attention to music that was written a million years ago. What we have now is like, what, 90% old music and 10% new music? Like, so it's...
If that, yeah.
That's a statistic I had just read like the other day, for some other class. Apparently like the 60% of the repertoire that like the top American symphonies play is occupied by the same 19 composers and the same like 50-ish pieces, I think. And then 75% of that, like another like 15% added on to those 19 composers, is occupied by like 30 composers and a group of like 100 pieces. Like, it's a huge block that's occupied by not only just classical music, but like such a limited supply or limited body of it.
Yeah.
I know we just kind of moving off of that. We have talked a lot about, like, when I was asking you for composers who really get the bass, we talked about like the excerpts and, like the pieces that you learn. And I'm curious and even like I have here like the flute rep decks for like the standard audition pieces, and it's a deck of playing cards. And even here, there's like pieces that I would never be asked to play in an audition because we don't have like, it's all the same pieces over and over. And I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on having this sort of, this standard rep. Like, is that something that we should, continue while still trying to integrate more new music? Or is it like, why do we have standard repertoire that like you must learn to go to the audition circuit? What is the place for that in the modern world?
I mean, I feel like having a standardized set of like what gets played at an audition has more validity than a standardized set of all the music that ever gets played in concert ever. But I definitely see your point. I can see why it would be good to have everybody at an audition play the same piece, but why does it always have to be the same piece? And in that regard, isn't it kind of unfair to like people who are kind of like just getting in? Like if I've been playing these excerpts all my life, does that give me an unfair advantage over someone who didn't have like access to all these excerpts like at an earlier date? Like, what if you just give everybody like an excerpt of a new piece that nobody's ever seen? Would that level the playing field more? I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out, but
I agree. There's merit in like everyone having like the same level playing field. Is like, we can expect these pieces, like that's what we should play. It makes it easy for a panel to know that like if they release their audition date like 2 weeks in advance, it's usually a month, but I don't know, emergency situation, I don't know, 2 weeks in advance, they can put a list together that they can assume everyone will have had experience with. It's not like anyone is having to learn new stuff. So that makes sense. I'm like you said, I kind of agree with the standard audition rep more than like the standard body of rep.
Sure.
Because it is like, at its base level, it's just like a presentation of how well you've mastered those techniques. But there's the problem, like with new music, if we want to like change the paradigm or change the group of new works, we kind of like, in my mind, we would have to integrate like new ways to test the new techniques we might bring in, or like we were talking about extended techniques. There are no like audition repertoire pieces that test for like Panicello or your fluidity with harmonics or your your access to the Siegel effect. Like, I don't know. Like, stuff like that, I feel like they've kind of, like, gridlocked each other to some extent amongst, like, the auditioners, you know. You don't really, like, practice those new techniques. There's no impetus to, like, play it.
Yeah, I really appreciate the point of, like, well, yeah, if we're leveling the playing field by we're going to test you on these things, there's absolutely no motivation to kind of escape outside of that for, like, even if you're somebody who's interested in new music, but if you have to spend all your time, you know, worrying about, am I going to get hired, you're not going to work on it.
Right. There's one, I was just thinking, like, if I wanted to have new orchestral repertoire audition excerpts that would test some of the techniques we talked about, I'm like, what would they be? I think if I really wanted a cool excerpt for, like, harmonics and your fluidity, like, way up high, playing those fluffy, beautiful harmonics, you know Ravel's opera, L'Enfant, et le Sortilège, or whatever it's called? It starts with this, like, crazy bass solo that's just high harmonics with, like, oboes in a different key doing something else, and it's, like, really hard, and it's, like, really high, and it's beautiful, but I'm like, I don't know, that would be such a cool excerpt to see, like, from a panel, because, like, that's a commonly performed opera. Why is that technique not tested for people trying to be the solo player, you know?
And, like, even being a piece of fairly older music, like,
yeah,
even
it's
just
Ravel,
like even having that extended technique in there would, I think, prioritize, like, hey, we should do more new stuff, because look, you can do all this cool new stuff.
And even within, like, without, like, the extended techniques, there are just new styles that we've been, like, exploring, like the glass quarter note, the glass running eighth notes, like, all of his symphonies and all of his works, like, they have techniques almost of their own style. You have to know how to play, like, the glass, like, sitting, running eighth notes, running quarter notes. Like, it's a very specific sound, and granted, it's not, like, hard, but you have to, I think, know the technique at this point, considering how, like, his operas and his, like, symphonies have kind of become part of the canon, almost. I don't know if they're, like, a fad with what he's doing, but at this point,
I would get the chance to play a Philip Glass symphony. Oh my gosh, I love his symphony.
I got to play the Low Symphony, his first one, I think. It was
That's my favorite one.
Oh. Yeah, it was fire. But I will say that, like, I had just gotten my new bass, like, my fancy fun new bass. It was still opening up, and it was still really tight around, like, the middle range. And there were just, like, 10 minutes of straight, like, F quarter notes at just a nice soft pace, but my bass couldn't handle it at the time. It was, like, squeaking on every third note, and I really had to, like, practice that level of consistency, which is, I don't know, something that, yeah, we have to practice, like, being consistent on our little eighth notes and, like, our little skittery Mozart runs, but I feel like composers like Glass, who are creating new sounds still, deserve their own, like, recognition from audition panels, just as they do audiences, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think a reason that we play, like, all the same music in concerts and, like, orchestras and stuff is that the people who, like, are really putting the money into the orchestras, I think they're the ones that, like, kind of demand it. Like, Uncle Pennybags, the billionaire, funds the Philadelphia Orchestra, and he loves Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, right? So they're going to play Beethoven's Fifth Symphony every year. But, you almost kind of think that if ensembles were more open to new music that audiences would be more receptive of, then maybe they could be more self-sustaining. They wouldn't need, funding from people who only want to hear Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. I feel like the source of the funding is kind of a big reason why they won't, like, put in more music from newer composers. And then that also raises the question, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention it, how do you get more composers from underrepresented groups into the picture when we're only playing music from the era of only, like, rich white guys could write music? No, well, not rich white guys, but, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we're playing, like, Beethoven and Tchaikovsky and Mozart all the time, like, how do we get, like, like Caroline Shaw in the picture, like a woman composer, like, like Karim Rustam, like I mentioned, he's from Syria, like, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think these are, like, really important questions in the field right now, and it's especially with the issue of, like, funding and values and where does the money go. It feels like you're just kind of I often feel like I'm just beating my head against a wall, like, but that's not what most people want to hear. And like piling on with that, I've found that like there's sort of two groups of people that are on the side of the new music argument. One being, if we play all the same old pieces, nobody new's going to want to show up, which is what I feel like is more ringing true to me. But on the other hand, there's people who I think would say, well, if we play music that only musicians can understand, nobody's going to want to come hear it. And I think there is this also like accessibility thing with like the general public and what do they know about music and what is going to be appreciated. And it's like, I don't know, I'm constantly like trying to find a balancing act of
well, one of my biggest focuses as a composer, and this is only my personal style, I wouldn't press this on anybody else, but I try to write music that's accessible as possible because like I just never really bothered with like stuff that like sounds super wacky and is hard to approach. Like I said, you know, certainly not knocking anybody that really pushes the boundaries, but I always try to make my music just nice and pretty sounding. I think we kind of I think we're kind of not giving audiences enough credit with regards to like their ability to appreciate music, maybe like you know, like we mentioned Ravel, like he was like the master of making music that you just listen and it just sounds good, you know what I'm saying? Like no special anything behind it.
Head empty. I mean, Ravel, yes.
Like I feel like there's a big like scene for that too. There's a lot of potential for that sort of thing. I mean, almost everybody I know that's ever been to a classical music concert that's not a musician themselves, why have they gone? Because the Philly Orchestra was playing the Legend of Zelda soundtrack, or they were playing the Star Wars soundtrack. That's all music that sounds good that you don't have to think too hard about, wouldn't you say? I think, like, but right now all we have is, you know, we got Beethoven and we got, like, Xenakis, right? But, like, you know, why can't we also have new music that is not super, like, off-putting? I don't know.
Yeah. Like, For me, I would say that Caroline Shaw is someone who falls under that umbrella.
Oh, for sure.
Like,
yeah.
I have non-musician roommates and showed them Partita, and they were like, that literally said, "Oh, this slaps," and I was like, "It does slap. You are so right."
I would agree, and I think maybe like that time-old story of like the misunderstood composer who presented their work caused a riot, Rite of Spring, Stravinsky style. I feel like that's like an ongoing thing that or not an ongoing thing now, but it is a story we've heard of like innovative new composers considered like normal now. We're testing the limits and angered people.
Yeah. And like TBH, I think the riots have just moved online, if we're being like...
Yeah. But then you look at those composers and you're like, oh, okay, he was like supported and like tutored by Rimsky-Korsakov, found by Diaghilev, found by like other rich people to like keep him going.
And patrons.
Amidst all the riots.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so again, like the tyranny of the board, whatever you want to call it, like where the money is coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever seen videos of Peter Valek or Petr Valek, however you say his name? He's the guy that bangs things together. And like he like plays the piano and it like knocks like a bunch of junk all over the room. Or he has like those little devices that clank around on the floor. You should check him out.
Like those chain reaction mechanical.
Yes. Yeah.
Wait, that's funny.
Like he like goes into like a shed where there's like all kinds of rusty crap all over, and he like knocks it all over the place, and he says, "Here's my new composition." First of all, I love his stuff. I think it's awesome. I think it's great. But a lot of people really want to do what he does. And I don't think they understand quite why they're doing it or what they're doing. They just kind of want to push the envelope however they can. But I think that it doesn't always have to be that way if you're a contemporary composer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. To some extent, that's just like performance art, which is just as like valid and necessary. But I don't know. Don't conflate the two if it doesn't. Yeah.
Like, if you're going to listen to contemporary music, you don't... And like I said, I like his stuff. I think it's really cool and interesting. but you don't have to go into a concert hall
Right.
and listen to someone bang pots and pans together.
Yeah, that's not the kind of thing that would be replacing Beethoven. It's a different kind of art.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Right.
get that. And so I think jumping off of there, we've touched on this a little bit, and so our like last big question that I have for you is like a multi-part question, I guess. But like basically it boils down to genre question mark, because like the 21st century is so bizarre in that like so many people are I'm a D&D nerd and I'm only coming up with multi-classing between like classical and jazz and like you were saying pop punk, and there's so many different genres. But on another level, I don't like, why are these useful? Is genre useful? Is it something that, you know, we need to be drawing these barriers, or like classical happens in this kind of concert hall and jazz happens in, you know, the underground club, and like why do we have these sort of divides, and are they still useful tools or just sort of like hindering the collaborative music making experience?
So to some extent, I'm like, they kind of like force these different blocks, these communities to form, and you're allowed to find other people who are generally interested in the same music, the same thing that you're doing. But then, so like, I don't know, it builds community to some extent within this relatively
Sure.
small community. But then, yeah, you're kind of blocking yourself out from like finding other audiences. I remember a composer friend of mine, I saw them tweet something funny like a few months ago or a few weeks ago. They said like, why do I have to release new contemporary music? Why can't I just like release new music? Or like, he said something along the lines of like, we're labeling it as even art music. I like that label the most. Like, art music is just, it's a step towards being more inclusive, but that like distinguishes itself still from like normal music, pop punk, jazz. Like, I mean, to some extent those labels help us like find other people like that on Spotify, but it is kind of blocking this distinct community from music. I don't know, from like Spotify artists where they should be, you know?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned about genres helping people find what they like, I think that's kind of really it. And like in my mind, like the way like we have, like it's the information age, right? We can all communicate with each other, like different cultures, different groups, in terms of music. You would think that at that point with everybody's like interplay, the lines between genres would get blurred and like erased, but instead what we're seeing is people are more mindful and more particular about genre than ever. Like in the 70s, you didn't have atmospheric black metal, you didn't have synthwave, you didn't have like shoegaze. I don't even know what shoegaze is. You know what I'm saying? People are very particular about genres now, and I think it kind of does come down to like if you want something that sounds like this, then you're gonna have a name for it, just so that you can find more of that. And like if you're like starting a band, you know, and you say we're a band that defies genre, what you're really saying is we're a band that nobody is gonna listen to because we don't sound like anything you ever heard anywhere. You know, like I feel like if you're branding yourself, it helps to try and like find a label just so that people who know what they're looking for can find you. But what you mentioned about like contemporary music, Ian, I thought that was also like pretty apt because you know, at what point do these labels become harmful, right? Like at what point are people rejecting music based on like labels? Like, have you ever heard someone say, I listen to all music, oh, except for country and rap? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Oh, yeah.
have you ever really listened to country or rap? Like, or you know, do you just kind of say that's what you're supposed to say?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely think there's a point where like the labels could be harmful because I mean it is music, right? It's not, you know, it's not contemporary music. It's just music. Like I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah. I
So-
know, like, for the music that I will call small c classical that is currently going on in the 21st century, like, this is something that I've talked about quite a bit with some of my friends in my undergrad. Our composition professor called it concert music to distinguish it from music that is not performed in the concert hall. But that has really, I find, very classist undertones of like, you're not going to listen to pop or rap in the concert, but like, why not? Like,
Right.
Yeah.
I think a big problem that I have personally with ideas of like really like genres defining not just a music taste, but a musical, like a musical community that's very us versus them, is that it does seem to always form hierarchies.
Yeah.
And usually
yeah.
it's the music of Black artists and people of color and non-Western European like traditions that get thrown under the bus when this happens. And it's something that I struggle with, because I feel like, especially using again that classical concert music as an example, like you've got classical, that's too stuck in the past. Concert, very weirdly hierarchical. Art music, again, is sort of drawing that divide, maybe less so, but it's just like, it's imperfect language, and at a certain point, it's like, I know it when I see it. It's the stuff that I do. Like,
Right.
Yeah. When Ian mentioned the word art music, I thought that's my favorite way to refer to it. Like music that we think of as classical music, we call it art music, the same way like a special kind of film would be called an art film. But the only problem is it kind of does, like, it does imply that music that isn't art music isn't art, right? Like, if you come up to me and tell me that, like, Straight Outta Compton is not art, I'm going to look at you like you're crazy. But, like, you know, but when you say art music is stuff like Beethoven and Mozart, it kind of does, like, have, like, kind of an air of, like, this is, like, the high art, and everything else, you know, falls by the wayside. So
It's very highbrow language, but
yeah,
it's something that we've kind of fell upon.
I think it's like a superiority complex drawn, and like I think part of it is just because we use that language and it is so pervasive, and like I don't know, it's just something that I think about a lot.
I also think I think about like in I don't know, like I think it was a music history textbook, they were explaining like I don't know, the problem with even the label classical music from like a epistemology standpoint, like classical era, that's all it's inclusive of by the language. Like that name specifically is a problem for academics of this area, but like they proposed as the solution possibly to call it like Western art music. And I'm like, what does that do? What does that do for anyone? Does that imply like, I don't know, outside of like Western Europe and like the East Coast, like that is not part of this circle, that can't be part of this circle. I think even the phrase art music descends from like just people trying to be snobby and break away from the classical music label. It's just weird. Yeah. Spooky.
Yeah, no solution comes to mind as far as I'm concerned, because like I said, like genre labels they're a thing, and you know, like it's not like we can just eschew them. But so I'm not sure what the future lies for those sorts of labels.
Yes.
I really just like it when this cello teacher, I don't play cello, but like I'm in a low strings class, and I checked out his website because he has a very like lofty solo career and like he's done very well, and he just like releases albums and releases music, and it's like he's just an established like Spotify artist, and it's very like, I don't know how big his music gets or how far it reaches beyond the circle of like art music, but he does just release it as music, and it's like, it's really cool. It is in the same vein as art music with like, I don't know, a lot of like cool tech, cool synth effects, cool cello runs that are obviously like messed around with, like that's his style, but like, is it art music or can we just call it like some form of pop? Some form of like techno, I don't know.
Sure, yeah. I don't think it's something that we need to search for answers for or like the answer, but yeah.
On this podcast,
we're gonna answer what is this? What is language?
And we'll both have like well prepared like reports.
Right.
Yeah. I would like you to now write your dissertation, and I'll have you back on to present it. Thank you.
There you go.
But no, I think that this is a really great conversation to be having, and I really, really appreciate you coming on to have this with me. So yeah, thanks so much to Ian Fales and Dean Mason for joining us here at Classical Schmassical. If you enjoyed the show, there's plenty more where this came from, so do make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you would like to continue this conversation or any of the conversations on bass, the social structures of the orchestral and audition circuit pipeline, or genre as it relates to the 21st century, please join the Discord linked in the description or visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/classical schmassical. That's schmassical, SCHMASSICAL. And remember, stay classy and questionably classical.